Hello, welcome to the RPO Football Show. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jamie Perog, Big Game James. We're here with Chew on This. We're going to give you some spicy stuff to chew on this week. And obviously, we have to have my main man, Chew, Father Dynasty. What is up, my brother?
What's up, Jamie? Just excited to get back at it, talk a little dynasty, talk a little kind of broader strategy that might be kind of a little player specific, but more just kind of broad strokes and help people out.
Yeah, it's time to settle some debates. Today, we're going to do some dynasty dilemmas. I always get people asking me in the chats or on Facebook groups or Twitter, and they just ask these questions over and over again. So I want to just send them the show. So right now, let's start with something easy. Trades. Like, what is your thoughts on trade deadlines? Like, some people think it's necessary, while others hate it. Like, what is your stand on trade deadlines in Dynasty?
So I generally hate trade deadlines because I just like to trade. But I think kind of a caveat to that is the one thing that I've kind of come to understand in some of the leagues that I've been in is once you're getting into the playoffs, depending on if it's like the final 2 weeks of a 2 week playoff season or what have you, I do understand kind of how things can get kind of miscombobulated when you have the playoffs start and say if it's four teams that are going to be in the playoffs and those teams that are in the playoffs, you have these non-playoff teams dumping the good players up to a playoff team and kind of throws everything into a loop. And I'd rather that not happen. I'd rather it be like there's like a period of time where you like the playoff teams, like they can be kind of secured, like separate from the non-playoff teams, just kind of keep a level playing field. But generally speaking, if it's just do I want them, yes or no, I'd rather have no deadlines. I'd rather just kind of let things fall where they may.
Yeah. So my problem is playoffs don't start till week 15, right? If you have like a week 14 deadline,
Mm.
then if I'm on that cusp of am I trying to make the playoffs? Yes, I'm making a playoff push, but I don't make it, then I wouldn't mind selling some of my older players to the
Mm.
contenders to try to get younger the following year. So, like some people see the trade deadlines as essential for fairness. Others think it's like a late season, like a strategy. So, like I see it as a strategy. So I don't want trade deadlines at all.
Mm.
So, so another thing is when people ask about trades, I need to know, is it a start eight? Do you start 9, 10, 11, 12? Like, you need to know how many starters are in your roster. So, like, how does the number of starters change your build strategy?
I think for me, it's kind of if it's 10 or less, it's going to be a kind of a similar answer in that group. And then I feel like if it's the 11, 12, I feel like that's where it's kind of changing because, well, it may not be a tremendous difference of going from 10 to 11. I mean, you could, 10 can be kind of like straddling the line of like, is it up above or below? But most of mine are, let's see, I'd say most of mine are, I have like some of the earlier ones I started that are like start 8 or 9, pretty small. And then probably the rest of mine are 11. I don't think I have any that are 12 that I can think of. So yeah, how I view some of those early ones that I started when it's start 8 or 9 versus 11, I view those in like kind of two different buckets when I'm thinking of the depth that is necessary for a start 11 versus 8 or 9 being I need to be a little more stud heavy and have a strong starting lineup to take on these other teams.
Exactly. So I was gonna say, like in a start 9 or 8, like it favors the studs and like those top heavy builds, but start 12 or even like 10, 11, it gets to that point where you need to like go towards depth and balance and more like mid-tier value plays. Like the quality, like starts, they rival like the rivalness of the quality. So I agree. I love the start 11 because it gives more depth to the roster, and it takes out the luck a lot. Because if you have a start 7, everyone has a good starting lineup. But if you have a start 11 or 12, then yeah, you go more towards strategy.
Mm.
and deeper guys, like how me and you deep dive into all these rookies. Those are the people that you want to have more of. So another dilemma that I've been seeing is contract year players. So, like, what is the dynasty implications of like pending free agents for that year and like going forward for the following years?
So I mean, this one can end up being player specific because you can see something like T. Higgins going into a contract year, and the thought is, you know, I think we hope he stays on the Bengals because at least we know it's a tremendous offense, but he is the number two. So is that ultimately a good thing for him if he goes somewhere else in a worse offense, but he's number one? What do we think about that? I think it's really just considering, we can't know how the upcoming season's going to go, but it is a contract year for them. So the assumption is they're going to do their level best to, to put on to get that next contract. And
Yeah.
depending on the position, probably wide receiver is more likely than running back. How liberal that a lot of these teams have been to use the tag on on the wide receivers, especially quarterbacks, just to get one more year and see what they can do. It's worth considering. Are you paying up and it's just going to be that one contract year season and then it's just all going to fall apart after that because they're going to get that big deal, go somewhere else, and just kind of you know take it easy. Not don't have to work as hard once you get that the money, but I think it's a very or player specific thing, and I think a lot of it is really just blind stupid luck when it comes down to what the agents are doing, what the owners are doing, and what ultimately happens to those players just a year later.
Yeah. So one that came to mind is Kyron Williams. He is in his last year of his contract. We don't know his future. It's very uncertain. He can blow up this year again, like he did the past 2 years. But McVay doesn't really re-sign running backs. So if he goes to another team, what team does he go to? Is he going to be in a committee, and as opposed to getting 80 to 90% of snaps? So like contract year players, like they can be boom or bust. Like the motivation is high, but like the future is uncertain and can crush long-term dynasty value on players just like Kyron Williams. So what's your thoughts on win now running backs versus like long-term wide receivers?
So this one, it can kind of depend on the team build and everything, but I feel like at the end of the day, it's dynasty, and barring some very very unique lineup setting that you have, it's gonna most likely be long term wide receiver cornerstone. Simply the longevity of that, the stability in when we look at the repeat players finishing as the number one player at their position in fantasy, the it's hard to say consistency, but I mean for wide receiver, I think you're going to see it's more likely that if you get a true cornerstone wide receiver, I mean a true one of those top couple of guys, there's a bit more stability there than at the running back position. And of course, you see the Christian McCaffrey jersey behind me. I think he's going to finish as a running back one this year, but I understand the volatility in that, and I understand that if he actually does it this year, it could be his last one out of his career. I mean, you simply do not know the running back position.
Exactly. So win now running backs, they win leagues today. But
Yeah.
when you get your wide receiver cornerstones building dynasties, like one's a sprint, the other's a marathon, pretty much. So you got to choose which one you want to go with. So that's going to be a dilemma for each individual person. So let's talk about elite proven fantasy quarterbacks versus like the unknown ceiling of quarterbacks taking like in the 101 in the NFL drafts.
This this is another one kind of, it can depend on the player, but I think when you're looking at the proven quarterbacks, I think people get kind of distracted by the shiny new toy. This is especially true at the quarterback position with the 101 in drafts. And I mean, I would imagine most of us, I know that all but I think one of the leagues I play in is Superflex. When it's Superflex, and if it's not a quarterback at the 101, again, we look at this year with Ashton Genty, it's going to be because there's a generational talent at one of those other three fantasy relevant positions. But at the end of the day, an elite proven fantasy quarterback is a cornerstone even better than a cornerstone wide receiver. I mean, when you're getting someone that's a Josh Allen, That's say a Lamar Jackson, any of these guys. There's a couple of these guys where it's like you could trade them away if you, I guess, are in a rebuild and think that's the most necessary thing to do. But if you think about what the return's going to be, is it ever really going to be enough? Is it ever really going to make enough sense to do that? I think there's cornerstones for a reason, and it's quarterback position, a position that nowadays can be playing into their late 30s. So it's someone to hold on to.
Yeah, so for that example that popped into my mind was Cam Ward or Trevor Lawrence, right?
Mm,
So the elite quarterback is safe, it's stable, and they score now. But the 101 is a mystery box that it could be gold or it could be coal. We don't know. So it's a dilemma you guys are going to have to figure out yourself, kind of weigh your options. But I'm going with the elite guy, and I assume you are too.
yeah.
So let's talk about some aging assets. All right. So when do you sell and how do you value these vets? Like, is it smarter to cash out early on players like a Tyreek Hill or a Christian McCaffrey? What are your thoughts?
So I am someone who on any of my dynasty teams, uh, my joke is that whenever you join my team as a player, you should never unpack your bags. You should never get an apartment or a house. You should understand that it's very possible at any given moment I could trade you. And it's understandable if you have cornerstone guys, likely they're going to stay unless something crazy happens. Players like this, like a Tyreek Hill and Christian McCaffrey, at this point, not cornerstones in the sense of, they are a bit older. Injuries have stacked up a bit. They are both on tremendous offenses, and I think both can, maybe Christian McCaffrey more so than Tyreek Hill, be the number one player at their position for fantasy this season. But the better years are sincerely behind them, and there's no doubting that. Um, and I think while this is on a player by player basis, I also think that it's funny thinking about at least these two examples of thinking I trust Christian McCaffrey longer than I do Tyreek Hill. And it's funny because I'm saying that about the running back versus the wide receiver. But I think when you see some of these things compound and, they come off of a tough season, you immediately begin to think, I think it was maybe before Christian McCaffrey had his last running back one season, there was even the talk then of like, is he done? He's done, right? And then he's the running back one in fantasy. So it's volatile, but I think if you're able to build a team around them that has a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of value to work with, you can take on one or two of these guys. But I think if you're trying to build a team around a couple of too many volatile assets like this, it's more likely to blow up in your face and then you have nowhere to go. You can't sell them at that point. So I think it's okay to take on one or two, but I think you're better off not really going much more than that unless you really just want to take the risk and just possibly have to tank for another 3 or 4 years and build it back up.
Yeah, so I do think it is smart to sell vets a year early as opposed to a year late. You got to cash out before the cliff hits, not during the actual fall. So let's go a little bit off that. So let's talk about age cliff management. Do you sell wide receivers at like the age of 28 and the running backs after age of 26? Like, do you fade the older receivers entirely? Is a bad process to roster any receivers over the age of 29?
So this one's gotten interesting in the last couple of years. I mean, I really think that probably each of these ages, saying 28 for a receiver and 26 for a running back, I could bump each of these 1 year later, uh, with most of those players at that position. And I'm not one to necessarily fade older wide receivers entirely. And that also is situation specific in terms of sometimes you get these older vets that, wide receivers specifically, they're going to be taking a shorter deal to go on a better offense to maybe go chase a championship or something like that. It provides kind of an intriguing upside to this is a more polished player. They're going to a situation where, yes, their athleticism, their better days are behind them, but they're going to possibly the best offensive situation of their career. And that's someone where I will buy that discount understanding that I may only sincerely get a year of it, not until their retirement, but just until they go to the next team and the next team, and you kind of miss on that. But for running backs, especially now, it's interesting to see some of these guys, the James Connors, the Joe Mixon, some of these guys that, again, they've taken a tremendous number of carries in their career, and they're still doing, I would say, tremendously well. So this is kind of similar to the last question when we were talking about how many of these guys do you take on? Do you sell them early? I'm okay accepting a little bit of this risk as some of these older players, but you can't build a team of only a Stephon Diggs and a Keenan Allen. Like at a certain point, these guys are simply too volatile, and there is then what do they have 1 or 2 years left? Are they even going to be on a team? Look at the Amari Cooper and Keenan Allen. They will find a team, but that's if you're depending on those guys to start, that's pretty worrisome at this point. So I think again, a little bit of that risk is okay, but you cannot have too many of these guys. You need to have some youth and some things that you can actually flip for value if you need to.
Yeah, so I agree. Wide receivers, they can hold value past that 28, 29, especially those elite ones. But you got to tread carefully after that 30-year-old mark. Running backs, yeah, you should probably look to sell them 26 to 27, unless they're unicorns. But like age isn't everything, but it does whisper very loudly in Dynasty. So tread carefully with that one. I'm sure. I think we're going to get more into that later on in the show, but I want to talk about some injury fallouts. So, like, talk about the long-term value, like the dynasty impact of some major injuries, and like how do you pivot from guys that are injured? For example, Ayuk this year, or we could go back and look at Adrian Peterson, which showed us all wrong. But how does this injury fallout affect your decisions?
I think it's interesting now with how some of the handling of, say, Achilles injuries have changed recently. You see J.K. Dobbins, multiple injuries of that, knee injuries, and is now, again, he's expected to be second fiddle to R.J. Harvey. But again, I think he can contribute significantly there in Denver. Um, I think the timeline for these, yeah, Adrian Peterson is an absolute freak of nature. What he did was unbelievable. And I think made us all jaded to think how quickly people are going to come back at 100%, if not 110. I think these guys, it was Chris Godwin when he was coming back off of his last injury. He came back and was not quite himself. Wasn't terrible by any means, but was noticeably not as good as pre-injury. But once he kind of got ramped up, he was doing tremendously better. Of course, lost another season to another injury. But I think we need to hamper these expectations of, Ayuk. It was not, I guess, if a simple knee injury is actually a thing, it was not that. Um, to expect him to come out and be 100% week one, I think is unrealistic. But with someone like him, I am one to look and see, is someone else going to be impatient? Did they buy when the injury happened? Week 1, 2, 3, he's not quite himself. Are they panicking? I'll buy that panic because I now know I'm, say 5 or so weeks away from him kind of getting back to his old Ayuk ways. So I will sometimes try to buy those injuries when they happen if I have a roster where, I can stash them on the IR and just kind of wait for it. But otherwise, I'll let other people take that injury risk and I'll wait to pounce when it's a little bit closer to their real return and they're really getting back to that actual 90 or 100% of production.
Yeah, that's exactly how I look at it. So, like major injuries, they do tank that value fast. So, if you have an option to buy low, if the talent's elite, like sell if the recovery looks cloudy. Though it depends on the injury also. Like always have a pivot, not just a prayer, right? No one is ever going to be Adrian Peterson again. So next, I was gonna do a stash or trash dilemmas. So I want to hear what you have to say about holding versus cutting, like those borderline dynasty assets. Like, what do you look for as a stash?
So this might be a little bit broad, but there has to be upside. But I'll explain. It's not it's not simply are they young, there has to be upside. I don't simply think young players by default have upside. I think there's other ways that players can have upside and have a bright future. And if I'm assuming this doesn't account for hurt players, so they're going to be in the IR, the rookies, call them on the taxi squad. So for those other people that I would be looking for as stashes, um, you can always have the backup running backs on good offenses. Is it a 49ers running back? Then put them on your roster. I don't care if it's the fourth one, just put them on your roster. But I also look for, if it's, say, a receiver or a tight end, look for guys that have maybe defined roles. Maybe the roles are not tremendous at this moment, but if they have a defined role and they seem to be doing well in that, that's, while I'm not on any of these teams, I think that kind of speaks to the coach having trust in what they do and trust with the quarterback and how they connect and everything. I think of last season, a Jalen Naylor or Devon Vele. Like, they're not big names by any means, but I think they both carved out pretty noticeable roles on their teams. And I think going into this season, those are two players, more so Vele than Naylor, that I'm kind of interested in because I feel like looking at their ADP, whether startup or anything like that, it's just kind of lagging behind. And again, are they de facto starters or even flex players? Not probably on a weekly basis. You need to wait and see how the season's going to play out. But if we're talking about stashes that are going to be cheap to get, possibly be throw-ins on a bigger deal, these are the kind of guys where I can kind of reasonably craft a narrative to think that there's, some tangible fantasy upside for these guys, and I would happily have that on my bench.
So basically, you stash for the upside. You look for youth, athleticism. You mentioned you look for flashes and limited reps like a Vele.
Yeah.
Even though he's a little bit older, that's a great stash right there. But if they're old and they're buried or they're kind of just bland, trash them. Don't hoard just on hope.
Yeah.
Yes. So next we're gonna talk about stashing backup running backs or like wide receiver flyers. We kind of hit a little bit on the wide receiver flyers, but like stashing backup running backs. Like who's the better stash on the end of benches in dynasty formats? Is it the running back or is it the wide receiver?
Most of the time, I'm going to say running back. I think as we've seen more and more, their teams are going away from a true bell cow. And again, even some of these guys that are the second running back, they're even with the primary running back healthy, they become a 1B some weeks, even if not the de facto 2. But I think that also gives them the opportunity to see some reps to where if they need to be elevated to the 1 because of injury or what have you, you already kind of have an idea of what they're going to look like in this offense. If it's someone who's, maybe like a pass catching specialist as a running back, you can kind of bank on consistency in that role, but you know that there's going to be weekly volatility and what's going to happen there. Of course, it's only real value in PPR. But yeah, I think the running back is more important there in terms of volume on the bench to have some more of those. A couple of wide receiver flyers are understandable and are okay. I mean, I mentioned, Devon Vele, but if there's like a Jalen Coker, like some of these guys where it's like, are they younger? Have they done a little bit, but they're not too old yet, and you think they can still step up and produce on a given week here or there? You don't know how the season's going to unfold, but if you get guys that have a reasonable chance to have relevancy at some point in the season, that's all you can hope for.
Yeah. So instead of stashing the wide receiver 3 in that offense, I'd rather have a Jaquez Hunter, a Will Shipley, and my man Roshan Johnson over any wide receiver 3 on the roster. So like backup running backs, they often pay off sooner. But like those wide receiver flyers, I mean, they can explode with breakout roles, but the running backs they win, and they're safer. Like the wide receivers are like more for ceiling, but like also wide receiver stashes are more expendable at a sooner rate. Like Parker Washington, Tutu Atwell, even at Chase Claypool. I know he had one big year, but like I literally just saw someone drop Chase Claypool today, and I was like, I got rid of him 2 years ago. Like, what are you doing keeping him on your roster?
So you still got Kelvin Benjamin on that team too?
I guess so, man. Like, I would rather definitely have those backup running backs as opposed to the receivers.
Yep.
So let's talk about some bench depth versus like trade capital. Like, is it better to have like 8 solid wide receivers or like flip them for picks that you could possibly get a running back in the 3rd round?
I think you got to flip them. I mean, and I don't even mean specifically only flip the receivers for picks. I mean, could you possibly also pair a receiver and a pick for a maybe more elite receiver, or like you're saying, a running back? I think when you have that many solid players, especially at the wide receiver position, I know it's a pretty in most leagues. I think when you look at waivers, again, even if it's like a 12-team start 11, so I mean, a lot of the players, of course, used up at that point, and you still see like Marquez Valdez-Scantling, or you see some guys where it's like, wait, they're on a roster. Like, it's more likely you're going to find even some of those guys that are going to be on waivers versus, again, like you were saying, so many people that are going to be stashing these running backs that may or may not have the opportunity, but could. And once they have that opportunity, immediately give you that fantasy production. But to have, I mean, 8 solid wide receivers, again, solid and not elite, I think you're probably better off kind of splitting that up and elevating the wide receiver position, elevating another position. You're not going to start 8 of them, so.
Yeah, so like, let's say you have a Flowers and an Addison on your bench, and your wide receiver core is pretty solid. I would be looking to sell both of them, package them together, find a team that is lacking wide receivers, and then go sell them for some kind of a capital or an upgrade at the position. Like, do you agree with that? Or would you rather keep the Flowers and the Addison just for depth?
I mean, I feel like I would at least be trading one of them. And I probably, given who they are, I probably wouldn't be married to one over the other. It might be more so just kind of what could I get in return, and I'm kind of flexible on which one I would move. But that's just kind of with where both of them are. Zay Flowers being the de facto number 1 in Baltimore, but what does that really mean?
Yeah.
And Addison, supposedly, I mean, at least as of this podcast, there could be some rumblings of things going further with his how was it, the traffic accident that he had.
Oh yeah,
So
forgot about that.
So I think that's moving forward a little bit. So something interesting of like, yeah, if you hear some news on that, you're like, yeah, like I have the depth. I'd rather move on from something like that before, God forbid, something were to happen. He loses more fantasy value. So you split that, and you have a pick and a lesser receiver instead of having to have Addison where you're not going to start him anyway.
Yeah, so if you have like 7 or 8 solid receivers and you're keeping two of them on your bench, like yes, that gives you flexibility and injury insurance, but flipping them for picks, like it bets on the future upside that you could be getting. Like, I know it's like a risk, but it balances of like it's a balance of like now versus later. So you're balancing the later more towards your side. Like, also those picks can't get injured. Those players can, so the value can't tank, right? So like the picks actually hold more value all year long than those players do.
Yeah, picks will never have the risk that a player does. And I mean, people
Yep.
always crap like it'll always be like, no, you need to get 2027 picks right now. Don't worry about 2026. We're going to get to 2026 draft, and those same people that said that to you during the draft are going to be trying to trade back up from the second to the first because they're going to be like, I didn't think they would going to be there. It's like, yeah, it's the first round of a dynasty draft. Like, there's the rookie draft. There's going to be people you want, and every single year it happens.
Yeah. So I want to get into like a startup kind of dilemma that I keep getting all these questions about. We talk about like a productive struggle versus like a win now or like a rebuild, right?
Mm.
And startup drafts. Should you build long term or should you just go in and try to win year one? How do you look at it?
So I cannot say that I've ever done a startup like full productive struggle. Like, I'm actively not trying to win this first year. I'm just doing everything I can to make sure I just kick out any of the fantasy points for my team. At best, I kind of fall in between, but I mean, I think going full fledged, I would lean more towards win now, but I think going fully win now in a startup can be a bit dangerous, including burning all of your like first round picks and to just stack up this roster. I mean, for an example, because it's funny that this was one of the questions. I literally had just finished a startup draft a couple weeks ago, and the joke was about how old my team was. But I mean, it's like a 12-team start 11. I've got Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Christian McCaffrey, James Conner, Mike Evans, Tyreek Hill, Trey McBride, Devontae Adams, DJ Moore, Jalen Warren, and Tucker Kraft are my starters. And I have my first, and I traded for 2 other firsts in 2026. So I basically traded back to get some firsts from the startup. And then I was like, well, I mean, I feel like that allows me to take on a little more age at some of these positions. And I have a couple younger guys on my bench that can kind of fill in. Got Garendo and Dobbins a little young, but that's the kind of thing where it's like that's fairly win now. But I also understand the sensitivity of, is CMC going to hold up? Is James Conner going to fall apart because he's 30 years old? Mike Evans is about done. Tyreek Hill, like we just talked about earlier, who knows? So it's that kind of thing where it's like there's volatility in that, but then having 3 firsts in 2026 can help kind of hedge my bets of like, I don't assume my entire roster is going to fall apart in a year. So, but if a 1 or 2 pieces do, I can still kind of work with that.
Yeah, I love that. So like, if you can compete year one, go win now, just like your build, right? But don't mortgage your future.
Yeah.
Like otherwise, I tend to lean more into that productive struggle or a straight young build where I'm only drafting like the first 3-year players. But when I look at my final roster, it's kind of a competitive younger build.
Mm.
So yeah, it all depends on how you want to last in the league and the success you're going to have. So let's talk about like draft picks versus players. Like, is a future first rounder more valuable than like a mid tier wide receiver, like Chris Godwin? What are your thoughts?
Ooh, that one's tricky, and then also it's tricky probably more so just because of who the player is in that scenario. I feel
Yeah.
like on the mid tier, it's kind of like, are you mid tier because you're younger and haven't quite achieved what people think you can? Are you coming off injury but have been productive? Um, I think that this is a tricky one, especially with it being Godwin. This is someone who may he start a little bit slow, and then he's worth buying once you get a couple of weeks into the season to be, you're not buying him at his lowest. His lowest would have been when he got injured, but you buy him closer to when he's actually coming back and producing. Um, but I think if you're someone who's going to be trading a first for someone like a Chris Godwin, even once it's closer to him actually becoming getting back to what he used to do, you you need to have the rest of your roster pretty set and be that de facto playoff team and really hunting for a championship. But at that point, I'm trying to think, is a first for Chris Godwin what sets you apart? I feel like there's probably better uses for a first. So in most scenarios, I would say this is not a good idea.
So, what
But
kind of receivers would you trade a first for? And keep in mind, it's going to be a late first because you're going to be competing, obviously, if you're trading away your first.
true. Well, and it also depend on who would actually give me that player for is
Yeah,
always the problem.
it's always team dependent. So
It,
that's the dilemma that we're talking about. Yes.
because I would say if what you're considering is I need to move this or I would like to move this first because to get points on my roster now is better serving me than
Mm.
is presumed to be later first. I would be more inclined to go even further in and go first plus to get something that I feel more secure with. I
Okay.
know that was a tweak to your question, but
How about this example? So last year I was 111, and I traded my 111 straight up for Baker Mayfield, and I went and I won a championship.
mhm.
So would you trade this year your 111 for a guy like Trevor Lawrence or Baker Mayfield, like someone in that 20 range? Because last year Baker Mayfield was quarterback 20 ish. in Dynasty, and I believe he's still around 20-ish, but he put up a top 5
Mhm.
year. So are you looking to sell that like 111, 110 to get like a quarterback that can win you your championship in a super
I would
flex?
feel if I could trade a late first for Baker Mayfield or Trevor Lawrence in a super flex, I'd prefer Baker over. I'm not a big Trevor Lawrence fan. I don't think he's ever. I have doubts that he's going to achieve what we keep kind of putting on his back since he entered the league. But I think either one of those, I would
So
100% trade it first.
you're a Panthers fan. I have Bryce Young around that 20 to 24 range. Would you give up your 111 for Bryce Young on that hope that he takes a step forward now that he has an actual receiver?
I would still do that, and I would hope because presumably whoever has Bryce Young is looking to move him. I would guess Bryce is probably their second or third, possibly quarterback. Um, I would hope that I could send to 111 and just have them throw another pick, Bryce plus another later pick, just for the sake of making me feel better about it.
Yeah,
But I do believe that even if we're not going to like extrapolate this out, and Bryce's final game of 5 touchdowns is going to be his norm. I think if you take some average of once he came back and was playing better, I think that you have a top 15 quarterback with that rushing upside, and I think that's
yeah,
something that I feel good about.
yeah. I mean, you want that top 20 running back for your 111.
Yeah,
But don't go get Sam Darnold because that's uncertain to me.
yeah.
And yeah, he had a top 10 year last year, but he's on a new offense. So if that's your dilemma, do not trade your late first to go get Sam Darnold because you need a second quarterback. So let's go to position scarcity versus best player available. Should you reach for like a tight end or a quarterback due to the scarcity of the position, or just take like the best wide receiver when you're doing like a startup or even your rookie drafts?
I think the answer might be a little bit different if it's startup or rookie.
Mhm.
Probably, I guess,
Well,
probably
let's hear
depending.
both. I mean, the audience wants to hear it. They need to
So,
hear it because this is the dilemma that I always keep getting
yeah,
questions for, and I'm sick of answering them. So
that's right. You just send them a link to this video. It'd be like, all right, pick the
exactly.
time card, figure this out. Um, when it's best receiver, kind of like we've talked about a couple questions ago, is best receiver someone that would be considered a cornerstone receiver? Because I have seen builds where the draft kind of falls in that type of way, and oftentimes you can go into a draft with whatever strategy you want. At a certain point, it doesn't matter, and you have to just kind of react to what's happening. So I don't think the default should be you have to panic and take what the position that you're supposed to take. You're supposed to take a quarterback, so you just have to take one. And I'll ignore the fact that there's like a couple cornerstone wide receivers sitting out there. Probably with if the scarcity was there, it's probably what the case is. Um, but I would say if you're going to do something like that, I'm not afraid to start with a cornerstone wide receiver. Uh, you need to be able to react, possibly with trades within the draft, especially a startup draft, uh, to make sure that if you're going to let something like, say, a quarterback slide, especially in the Superflex format, down a little bit further, understand that you don't want to get boxed out of even having like a Geno Smith or something. Like you need to have something to work with. And I'm I'm not bothered with taking, two quarterbacks that are both at least what are considered like back half of the league at this moment. Because like you're mentioning with Baker, like we're talking about with Bryce Young, more often than not, like you're gonna have like some of these guys creep into maybe the top 15, top 20 that were outside of the top 20 in any given season. So at least strictly from a production standpoint, that's nice to be able to have the chance to capture that in the quarterback position while you have the stability of one or multiple cornerstone wide receivers. So don't be afraid to take the cornerstone wide receiver. Just understand that you may need to react a little quicker with trades or with picking sooner than you would have thought with quarterback after that.
Yeah, so I had this dilemma in a recent startup. I was in the 5th round. I already had 2 quarterbacks. My quarterbacks were Josh Allen, Drake May. I have Garrett Wilson and Travion Henderson, who you all know that I have in the top 10 in my dynasty rankings. This is a best ball dynasty startup. So I had my 2 quarterbacks, a receiver, and a a receiver and a running back. Then Cameron Ward fell to me. And I'm thinking of the value, and I'm like, this is such good value. Do I take Roma Dunze or Rashi Rice, who I both have in my top 20 wide receivers, but I also have Cam Ward as my top 20 quarterback in Dynasty. And some people even have him at like 12 to 15.
Ooh.
Yeah. Well, I think when we talked about our episode, you had him at like 15, 16, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, let's say 15, right?
Yeah.
So in Superflex, a top 15 quarterback is worth a hell of a lot more than the 20th receiver.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I already had 2, I went and I took Cam Ward. I got Rice my next pick.
Nice.
But like, so now I have 3 quarterbacks. Other people, they don't even have like 1. Honestly, Jared Goff's their number 1 in this league. So and it's a tight end premium, and then like we're talking about scarcity. Hawkinson is in my top 5 still, and I got him 2 rounds later after I took Cameron Ward.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
So
mean, you're stacked with
I
value. That's great.
I would have easily took Hawkinson where I took Ward because he's a top 5. But I didn't reach on these guys because I was like, I was going to let the draft fall.
Yep.
You can't reach on them. So the scarcity, don't let it fool you because scarcity does matter. But usually, best player available wins. Wait on your tight end, wait on your quarterback, unless a true elite value falls. So wide receiver depth, it lets you build value for later, but you could also trade one of those elite guys that fall to you. So let's move on. Let's go on to quarterback hoarding in Superflex, which I just talked about. Is it viable to build around 2 to 3 to, I mean, like 3 to 4 quarterbacks, or is that bad dynasty process?
No, I mean, I think 3 is what you should have regardless. Like that's kind of how I kind of feel like is the floor. Now, are those all 3 starters? I think is the different scenario there. You have 3 players that could sincerely start or do start.
Yeah.
But I think if you're going with 4 starter, like 4, not elite, but like 4 starters where like you have like 1 elite, 2 at or above average, and then the other one's more of like he is a starter who could have some value, like what Mason Rudolph would have been before Aaron Rodgers signed, like something like that. I think that 3 is probably the way to go. I think too much of any one position, it doesn't really hinder you. Again, if you're going to have too many of one position, quarterback would be the one in terms of presumably the liquidity of the 4th quarterback, or trading like your 2nd quarterback and having the 3rd and 4th kind of slide up a little bit is probably worthwhile. But I don't personally like to have 4 at any one time, unless it's like if you were counting taxi squad of stashing like Jalen Milrow or something like that. Just because I end up, again, I trade too much, so they probably wouldn't last on my roster too long, and I would move one of them pretty quickly just to kind of balance everything out. So, what about you?
So I think it is better to target like 2 solid starters, like I did in my draft. But I like to use my other picks on those skill players, unless you see a potential top quarterback fall in a startup, like I just explained that Cam Ward did. That's
That's a
not my
no-brainer, yeah.
Yeah. So that's not my normal kind of way of drafting. So I will get my 2 starters, and then I'll get like someone outside the top 20, 24 as my 3rd.
Mm.
And then maybe it depends on how deep your benches are, but I will usually target with my last pick the backup of my starter or my Superflex guy. And that's usually how I do it. So I'll usually end up with like 4 guys on my roster, but like one of them is going to be a backup. Maybe 2 will be a backup, but they are expendable. It's just like Mac Jones right now. If you have Purdy, go get Mac Jones. If you have JJ McCarthy, go get Sam Howell. You know, even if you have Justin Fields, go get what's his name? Taylor, the guy.
Tyrod Taylor.
Tyrod Taylor. Go get him.
Shout out Hokies.
Yes. So let's talk about. Let's see. We got some time. Let's talk about trading rookie picks, like before or after the rookie draft, because this is the dilemma that people before the rookie drafts happen. They're like, should I trade the 107 for this guy? I'm like, I don't know who's going to fall there. Like, what team is this guy going to be on? Like, is it better to gamble pre-draft or wait for landing spots?
So these are the kind of ones, especially when it's draft season. You see people on Twitter just throwing stuff around like, should I be able to trade this not cornerstone wide receiver, say like probably the level below for like a mid to late first. I'm all for taking advantage of rookie hype. Before we have landing spots, but where that rookie pick is going to be for the sake of your draft. Depending on what your team looks like and you see what someone's offering you, there's always, like we said, there's more risk in the player than the pick. But you're getting very close to where that pick is about to turn into a player, so the risk is about to be pretty equal. If someone is really just enamored with who they think they can get at the 107 or something like that, and they're going to trade you a player who, they may not be a cornerstone necessarily, but they're fairly elite, but they're a 27-year-old receiver and they just want to get rid of them or something like that. I think it's worth considering. I think, like anything here, it's all relative to what your team looks like. If for that 107, is that like the only pick you have until the 3rd round, and you're maybe a little concerned that your team's a bit older, then maybe you don't want to trade that for an old receiver and then also not pick till the 3rd. So it's really just depending on what you have on your roster and what you need. Again, in the offseason, the only thing you need is value, and you'll figure out your starters once it's August, September. But if someone wants to panic and freak out and send you someone who they think is over the hill and they're just overreacting, I absolutely take advantage of that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Waiting for landing spots, though, it does cut down that guesswork. Sure. And it like boosts the value or the possibility decreases. But like gambling pre-draft, you can snag bargains if you trust your scouting. That's all I gotta say. Trust your scouting, but it doesn't always work out because Harvey, look, he raised up. Now, even after the draft, he was going 106, 107 in some of my drafts.
Yep.
And now he just went 202 today because of the Dobbins signing.
That's nonsense.
So like, that is complete nonsense. But anything could change. Yeah. It doesn't matter, like their landing spot, but like even free agent signings like the Dobbins can tank some value. But I think people overreact, in my opinion. So let's see. Do you hold like the 2026 picks, or do you use them to buy those 2025 startable players? I know we kind of touched on this earlier, but like how long term should you really plan in advance?
I mean, I kind of view Dynasty really with any team that I have, even if I'm kind of viewing it as like a rebuild or a retool. I'm only ever looking 2 to 3 years, and I don't ever see it as like, maybe this is why I never in the startup do a full-fledged, like complete, just tear it down. It's young. Give me even future picks. Like, you never know what's going to happen. Like, there is a bit of luck, so you never really know what's going to happen on like a year-to-year basis in fantasy. I've seen some just unbelievable misfortune with how injuries happen to play. Like, it's not that you expect or don't expect them to happen to certain players. We say running backs are more often to get injured. There's re-injury risk for certain injuries that have happened to players before, but sometimes things just happen. Sometimes it's no one has a season-ending injury, but how the injuries happen throughout the season on your fantasy team, it just implodes your team. You miss the playoffs, and then by the end of the year, you look at your roster, you're like, how did this team not make the playoffs? How am I not in the championship right now? And sometimes things just don't work out your way. So in that sense, I would say similar to the last question, yeah, it can depend on who that startable player is, but you do want the comfort of they're startable, but do I want just a starter or do I want someone who I have a little more faith in to actually contribute multiple weeks for me and not just be a spot starter, say?
Yeah, so just like plan enough just to stay competitive. Like use your 2026 picks for 2025 starters who can pay off if it will accelerate your win without
Yep.
gutting the future.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so this I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but like holding injured stars or selling at a discount. I wanted to bring up Nick Chubb, and I think we brought up Ayuk earlier. But how do you look at like holding those injured stars compared to like selling them?
So, and definitely two different stories here. I mean, Ayuk is one. I'm holding him. I think I've still got him in one league. But someone would say of Ayuk status, he's someone who, if I have a team that is in a bit more of a rebuild, uh, he would be someone who I'd be going at. Well, at this point, he's closer to coming back, but like when all that stuff happened, he would have been someone that I would have been going after to buy and hold. Um, I know it ended up being a bit more complicated of a knee injury than I think was initially thought. Again, I don't think there's any such thing as a simple ACL tear, but again, there was a number of other things that had happened with that. But you know, Ayuk, he's young enough, and he had at least given us that one full season of showing us what he can do. I don't like to bank on the Juju Smith-Schuster effect of the one season and then we just never get it again. Like I know that's very possible. We could just it could just evaporate and he never is fantasy relevant really again. But Nick Chubb is someone who I actually just completed a trade. I think it was today. I traded Xavier Legette and a 2027 second to get Nick Chubb and Tucker Kraft. Mostly it was to get Tucker Kraft, and I just Nick Chubb. I was like, why not? And it was a team where I'm just like, it couldn't hurt to have, like we were talking about stashing running backs on the bench. It's like Chubb was basically a throw in. It's tight end premium, so I wanted to get Kraft. I wanted to get a younger tight end to include my tight end room. And sometimes they're more than throw ins, but at this point in their career, again, Nick Chubb is not what he used to be. But I do think he has reasonable value for this season exclusively. Like I said, 2 to 3 year window. Someone like that, if he's off my team by next year, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, the only reason I bring this up again is because like I wanted to talk about like holding injured stars can pay off if the injury is short term. Otherwise, you sell them at a discount. But like the 2024 Jonathan Taylor, his high ankle sprain, it tanked his value last
Mm,
year. It takes about you have to look at the actual injury. It took 2 months for him to completely heal. Like it paid off at the end of the season because he scored over 20 points a game the last 3 weeks and he won me championships. So it does pay off buying injured players, but just pay attention to what the injury and the recovery window is.
mm-hmm.
Um, so let's get, we're about to finish this up soon. There's a few more things I wanted to talk about real quick. Do you like consolidating assets versus like diversifying? So do you trade three wide receiver twos for an alpha wide receiver one, or do you keep that depth?
This would mostly depend on the number of starters. Say we're talking if it's
Yes.
is it eight
Yep.
or nine, that would matter. And say if it's a little bit deeper, um, maybe instead of it being three wide receiver twos, can I do two wide receiver twos and a pick? Kind of balance it out to where I'm not just having every like I try to look at write out the amount of stuff that I mean, like I know phones can do plenty of things with trades and stuff. I'm oftentimes just like having a notebook and I just scribble out rosters and like what's going to happen with it. Like I look at my starting roster and what kind of reasonable depth I have. I look after the trade. I'm thinking, am I just stripping my team down to the studs where I'm one injury away from just missing the playoff space? Like my team's going to fall apart. That's never worthwhile. But yeah, consider, is it 8 starters? Is it 11 starters? And consider what that does to your starting lineup. And after one injury, what does that do to your depth?
Exactly. So how do you determine? I get this question all the time. Should I rebuild or should I contend? Like, how do you determine a rebuild versus a contender, and what do you look for on a roster?
Uh, so it's probably just as important to look at your roster as it is everyone else's. So I think you have to kind of look at the horizon of like you can't control what other people do. You can only control what you do. So if you see their rosters and you think it's a 12 team, yeah, start 11. There's probably two teams that are juggernauts, and one that barring something unbelievably unforeseen, they're gonna be the juggernaut for years to come. The other one maybe here for now, maybe not later. If on your team, if you have some sort of clear path to immediately identify what are my cornerstones, what is my premium draft capital in terms of the first and seconds, and probably for like the next 2 or 3 years, I think it's usually 3 years as far as it goes out, and kind of see like what can I do with this. Just sketch out a couple of trades. Just say, hey, like I'll keep my cornerstones, sketch out trades, and just kind of get an idea. Send out feelers, even if you start doing little trades here and there. Just just quietly acquire some upside players in seconds and thirds. Sometimes when you're rebuilding, if you just immediately start trying to sell people for firsts, they kind of sniff it out, and the league's not gonna just hand you a bunch of firsts. But like you actually had said in an earlier question about playoffs, if there's no trade deadline and you have these guys that are hungry to win the championship, if you have a player or two that is worthwhile to send them, you get your draft capital. If this is
Yep.
not your season and you got a longer horizon, a 2-year horizon maybe, then take advantage.
Exactly. So what is your rebuild timeline? How long should it actually take to truly rebuild? Like, is it 1 year, 2 years, or more?
Jeez, that's a very good question. Ideally, it's not more than 2 years. I mean, and I would say not more than 2 years to make the playoffs. I don't, because again, anything can happen once you make the playoffs. If you can make the playoffs, there's a lot of variability there. To just lock down, win the championship, and like be that just de facto number one team, probably take more than 2 years, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. Like a true rebuild usually takes about 2 years to start competing. 3 years, it's enough time to develop enough talent and accumulate assets without actually losing your patience too soon.
Yep.
So, can you actually rebuild without trading your studs? Like trying to rebuild around. I get this question all the time. Like, should I trade Justin Jefferson for these three future first? Should I trade Jamar Chase for these three future firsts? Like, are, are you going after these unknown assets? Are you keeping that elite one like a Chase Bijan? Like, does it work?
Um. Again, I think we talked about this kind of with the quarterback. Maybe it's a quarterback one or something, but it's tough to rationalize what is good enough for Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, all that kind of stuff. Like it's, I get it. Like if it's a bunch of firsts, then it's like okay, well, like we were talking about, I'd rather have a bunch of firsts than give me some players where like they're not Justin Jefferson and they're just at varied levels where I don't know. In 2 years, my team's going to suck still, and you have Justin Jefferson. That's great. Like if it's going to be something a big move, make it be pick heavy for sure. But oftentimes you have like the best team saying, "Yeah, I'll give you a couple of firsts." And it's like, well, dude, these are going to be like the 111,
Late.
112, and
Yeah.
111. I don't give a shit
Yep.
about that. So
Yeah. So
oftentimes I would say hold on if you can. Yeah.
So I always tell these people because I always get questions about Jefferson and Chase and Bijan. I'm like, do not sell them unless you get at least a top four rookie pick that year, plus another first on top of that.
And hell, even get a quarterback in there if you can. 'Cause if you
Yeah,
if you can get yourself a
exactly.
quarterback and like first and that kind of stuff, it's
Like,
like okay, you got a valuable player, valuable pick, good to go.
yeah, exactly. So like veterans on a rebuild, can you rebuild with someone on your roster that's a vet that's over that 28, 29, like Cortland Sutton? can you use him for trade bait later on in the season, even in a rebuild, as opposed to just throwing him away to get what you can for him?
He's someone who, and there's certainly players like him. I think it's worthwhile, to hold on to a couple of those guys, like we were saying, to have someone like him who, once playoffs are coming around, people are a little less sensitive to how old is he, and they're more attuned to how many fantasy points is he giving me right now, and that would be a prime example of holding on to someone like that to get maximum value. Because I'm sure there's other players you could trade in the meantime.
Yeah, so we're at the 1 hour mark. We're gonna get out of here, but before we go, I just want some player versus player, kind of some not debates, but just give me who you have. So like Barkley versus Bijan.
And
I know it's tough. I know it's going to be like, oh well, it depends if I'm the. But
Bijan,
what if you're right in the middle? What if you're neutral?
if you're neutral, I'm Bijan. But if you're neutral,
Okay,
I think that probably helps because then you
but
can kind of be.
well, what
Good.
if Barkley puts you to that championship, but like Bijan puts you in that rebuild mode, like right in the middle?
Mm.
It's tough, right? Like
Well,
we
and
don't know.
yeah, and in that instance, again, I know Saquon's coming off the season that he had. Uh, I see AJ Brown as someone who I think can. I think the passing volume is going to increase from what it was last year, one of the lowest of Hurts's career. But not because Saquon's going to be bad or it could be anything like that. Um, but Bijan is someone who I think, while he's younger and he's yet to be the running back one, he's pushing for that. And I think it's not just he's younger, he'll be better for longer at this point. But he's someone who I think I would rather have over Saquon.
How about Mark Andrews versus Tucker Craft?
I'm gonna go Tucker Craft. I like Andrews. I know it was kind of an up and down season, dropping that pass. I know it's going to haunt him for the rest of his life. But Tucker Craft, I think, we talk about the wide receivers in Green Bay. It's Tucker Craft.
Aaron Jones versus Tony Pollard. They're so
Oh
close in
man,
dynasty. They're so close in dynasty, and they're so close in redraft. Which one would you go with?
I don't feel good about it, but I'm gonna go Tony Pollard.
Man, it's a coin flip to me, and I've had this decision, and I've taken I took Aaron Jones over Pollard.
Yeah.
But then I also went in best ball. I also got the backup. What's his name
Oh,
from San
Spears.
Fran? No.
Oh, Mason.
Oh yeah, Mason
Mason. Yeah,
Taylor
yeah.
or Mason. Yeah,
Jordan Mason.
whatever.
Yeah,
Jordan
yeah.
Mason. So if I have Aaron Jones, I want Mason. If I have Pollard, I want Spears.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. Here's a good one: Dak versus JJ McCarthy. Someone we haven't seen yet.
Dak.
See, I'm gonna
I
go
don't believe in
JJ.
JJ.
I don't either, but I love the offense. That
True.
offense
True.
made Darnold a top 10 quarterback.
It's true. Again, even if he's not the guy, like the franchise guy in with the traditional sense of what we think, his best opportunity realistically would be with the quarterback whisperer there in Minnesota. So I think it can at least insulate him to allow him to maybe not lose games, but help the rest of the team win the game, if that makes any sense at all.
But it is a tough one because Dak, I mean, they are going to throw more. They didn't bring in viable running backs that are going to run the ball a lot.
Yeah.
And they brought in a receiver that he has another target for. So
Yeah.
that's a great dilemma right there, man. Dak or JJ,
Yep.
it's tough. How about DJ Moore, who's 28, or Zay Flowers, who's 25?
I hate this because Zay Flowers coming in the league. I was so hyped on him, but it's DJ Moore. I know they keep adding to that wide receiver room, and he's just one of many weapons for Caleb. But yeah, I like the security of DJ Moore.
Yeah, I would probably go DJ also, even though there's more mouths to feed.
Yeah.
And they're both number ones in their offense. Give me the better passing offense, honestly.
Yeah.
One more before we get out of here. Juwan Jennings, 28 years old, who I'm all over this year. Or do you go with Jaden Reed, who already has a solidified role as the slot receiver in an up and coming offense, who's 25?
It doesn't feel good, but Juwan Jennings. I mean,
I agree.
Jaden Reed was another one who I bought into. Thankfully, I did not succumb to me freaking out over Jaden Reed being the next big thing on all of my dynasty teams. There was one team where I immediately got him. Again, regrets a bit. It's probably a strong word, but Jawan Jennings is someone who, again, he's risen from mediocrity is maybe a little bit mean, but that's kind of true. And I think with how this wide receiver room has been being built and this how they've kind of shown keeping him there, they're saying they trust him. And again, look at who's around him. Like it's the Jawan Jennings show.
Agree. He's one of my most drafted players in best ball. If I miss out on Sutton, if I miss out on Ridley, I'll get Jennings like a round or two later in best ball. But I also think he's undervalued in dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think this was a great show. Let's tell the audience where they could find us, and let's get out of here.
Absolutely. You can check me out at Father Dynasty on Twitter and check out my Substack, Father Dynasty Substack, of course. And Jamie, where can they find you?
I mean, I'm all over social media at my name, Jamie Perog, Facebook, anywhere, Twitter, right here on the RPO network. We're talking Dynasty today. I mean, it's never just player versus player, right? It's future versus now. It's floor versus ceiling. It's risk versus reward. Make your picks, trust your gut, figure out the dilemmas and build your squad the way that you can actually win a championship. Thanks all for joining. This is the RPO Football Show. Talk to you next time.